Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we tackle those really complex shifts, policy tech, and try and boil them down for you. And today, well, it's a fascinating one, a real paradox, actually. Electric vehicles, EVs. They're supposed to be the clean green answer, right? But their very success is creating this enormous, frankly, unavoidable financial headache for governments,
hmm
especially those relying on, old school fuel taxes.
It really is a case of success creating new challenges. And the UK, well, they're lining up what looks like a pretty aggressive solution, a new mandatory paper mile tax, specifically aimed at EVs, basically to plug this looming fiscal black hole.
The black hole. Okay.
And our sources, they're confirming this isn't just talk anymore. Policy work is speeding up because, well, the revenue crunch is happening right now.
Right. So just so you, the listener, get the picture, what kind of money are we talking about here? How
Yeah.
big is this black hole?
We're talking about a fundamental problem for funding public services. Right now, you've got motoring taxes, that's fuel duty mainly, and vehicle excise duty, or VED. Together, they pull in around 35 billion every single year for the UK Treasury.
35 billion. Wow.
Yeah, and fuel duty is the big chunk of that, maybe 28 billion or so.
35 billion pounds. I mean, just for context, that's enough to cover the entire policing budget for England and Wales, plus all the local road repairs. With billions left over, that's a staggering amount of income to just disappear.
It is, and the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, they confirm it. As internal combustion engine cars, ICE vehicles decline, this loss is, well, it's inevitable. They reckon fuel duty revenue is peaking pretty much now, 2024, 2025, at around 30 billion.
So it's already started.
Pretty much.
Right.
From here on, basically every EV sold speeds up that decline. They're calling it a very real problem for funding, hospitals, schools, roads, all within the next 10 years or so. So moving to a new system, it's not really an if, it's a when and how.
Okay, so that sets our mission for today pretty clearly. Using the material you shared with us, we're diving into the specifics. What's the actual proposed tax? How on earth can they track mileage without everyone screaming about privacy? And crucially, how do you make it fair? Especially for, people in rural areas or key workers who just have to drive.
Exactly. It's not just about the money, the fiscal need, it's about the politics, the complexity of getting it right.
Right. Let's kick off with the current system then, because while the government needs the cash, our sources are pretty clear that reform isn't just about plugging a gap. The current system has some pretty big flaws itself, doesn't it? Quite unfair in some ways.
It is, yeah. And part of the problem is that the unfairness is kind of hidden. Fuel duty, you pay it per liter of fuel you buy. And that tax is just mixed into the price you see at the pump. There's no transparency. Most people, honestly, have no real idea how much they pay each year. They either guess way too high or way too low.
And that's where the mechanism itself starts to bite the people who can least afford it, right? Paying per liter.
Hmm.
How does that hit lower income drivers harder?
Well, it comes down to the car's efficiency. If you're driving an older car, maybe it only does, say, 30 miles to the gallon.
Mm-hmm.
You're buying a lot more petrol and paying that hidden tax more often to cover the same distance as someone in a newer car doing maybe 60 miles per gallon.
Ah, right.
So effectively, the less efficient your car, the more tax you end up paying for every mile you drive.
That really clarifies it. So
Yeah.
the system we have now encourages newer, more efficient cars,
Yeah.
which, let's face it, tend to be bought by wealthier households. And at the same time, it puts a heavier burden on drivers stuck with older, less efficient vehicles.
Exactly, which actually makes the case for a distance-based system rather than a fuel-based one seem, well, intrinsically fairer from the start.
It lays the groundwork for change, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the proposed fix then. The UK government has actually put a number out there. An estimated 3 pence per mile charge, just for fully electric vehicles, probably starting around 2028.
That's the figure being talked about, yes. 3P.
And hybrids, they're in the mix too.
Yeah, the expectation is they'll be taxed too, but probably at a lower, maybe variable rate. It's still a bit fuzzy.
Okay, so that 3P figure, let's put it in context for people listening. How does that compare to what drivers pay now?
Well, the average petrol or diesel driver right now pays roughly 600 pounds a year in fuel duty. That's kind of the benchmark they're trying to replace revenue-wise.
So how does the 3P EV tax stack up against that 600 pounds?
It really depends on how much you drive. If you do about 12,000 miles a year, which is pretty average, that 3P tax works out to about 360 pounds a year.
Okay, so less than the current average.
Yeah. If you're a lower mileage driver, maybe doing 8,000 miles, that's only 240 pounds a year. You'd have to be a really high mileage driver, maybe a fleet car doing 20,000 miles, to hit that 600-pound mark under this proposal.
What's really interesting there, though, is even with this new tax, EVs still sound like they'll be way cheaper to run overall.
Oh, absolutely. That's the crucial context here. Even factoring in the 3P tax, running an EV, charging it up, maintenance, it costs somewhere between, say, 10p and 12p per mile right now, petrol or diesel. You're looking at significantly more, probably 19p to 21p per mile.
Right.
So this tax, yeah, it makes sure EV drivers contribute to road costs, but it definitely doesn't wipe out that big economic advantage of switching.
Which makes the pushback from some parts of the industry a little surprising. You mentioned bodies like the SMMT warning it could slow down the EV transition, especially for fleets. But if a cost gap is still that big, why the strong opposition?
Well, I think it's partly about visibility and certainty. Fleets calculate their total cost of ownership, TCO, very carefully. Introducing a new, very visible tax, even if it's ultimately lower than the hidden fuel duty, just adds complexity and, well, uncertainty for their planning.
Okay. The admin headache.
And probably consumer perception, too. They worry it kind of bursts the tax-free bubble that's encouraged some people to switch.
Then on the flip side, you've got people saying, well, hang on, it is fairer this way. Everyone who uses the roads pays. Plus, there's that argument that EVs, being heavier because of the batteries and having that instant torque, might actually cause more road wear and contribute more to non-exhaust pollution, like from tires and brakes.
That's definitely part of the pro-tax argument, yeah. And we also saw in the sources a lot of concern specifically from plug-in hybrid owners. They're worried they might get caught in the middle, paying the old fuel tax when they use petrol and the new EV mileage tax when they run on electricity.
Yeah, like a double whammy.
Exactly. A kind of confusing, potentially unfair double taxation. That's something the policy design really needs to sort out quickly.
Definitely. Okay, let's pivot to maybe the biggest hurdle, public acceptance. You know, whenever politicians even whisper road pricing, the assumption is it's political dynamite. Hugely unpopular. But the research you shared, this felt like the big aha moment, the public view. It's actually quite nuanced, maybe even movable.
Yeah, this was really striking and probably the most hopeful finding for reformers. Okay, yes, initial reaction, there's resistance. But dig deeper. 3 out of 5 people, 60%, already agree the current tax system needs fixing. That's a solid base.
60% agree reform is needed.
Okay. And even better, when people actually engaged with the arguments, when the unfairness of the current system was explained and the different policy options were laid out, support for switching to a pay-as-you-drive system actually jumped by 8 percentage points, up to 49% overall, nearly half.
Wow, an 8-point swing just from explaining it properly. So the opposition isn't necessarily to the idea of paying for road use. It's more about the fear of how it might work out in practice. If opinion can shift like that, what's the absolute core issue they need to solve to get people on board?
It boils down almost entirely to fairness. Specifically, fairness for people who don't really have a choice but to drive. The number one reason people gave for being against it, cited by 63% of those initially opposed, was exactly that belief. Pay per mile is just unfair to those who must drive.
Right. Like you said, the rural commuter, maybe a care worker going between appointments, someone working night shifts when there's no public transport.
Exactly. Those people see it as potentially penalizing necessity.
And that burden is already higher for some groups. There was a pretty stark statistic in the sources about rural drivers, wasn't there?
Yes, really stark. On average, rural households already spend about 14% of their disposable income just on transport.
14%.
Compared to only 10% for urban households. That 4 percentage point gap, it's huge. It basically makes transport costs like a massive, unavoidable second rent payment if you live outside a big town or city.
Okay. So any new system that doesn't explicitly account for that difference is going to be seen as deeply unfair, potentially regressive.
Absolutely. It has to be baked into the design from the start.
So what specific ideas did work? What fairness mechanisms actually seemed to resonate with the public and, move the needle on support?
The single most popular idea across the board was the concept of a tax-free mileage allowance.
Like the first chunk of miles you drive each year are free.
Exactly. People like that because it gives them a sense of control over their costs. And crucially, the sources suggest this allowance could be varied geographically, specifically to tackle that rural-urban divide we just talked about.
Meaning, okay, so a driver in a remote area who maybe has to drive miles just to get milk or see a doctor could get a higher allowance, say 3,000 free miles a year, while someone in a city with loads of buses and trains available might get a lower allowance, maybe 1,000 miles.
Precisely. That's the concept. Of course, implementing that fairly, that's the challenge. How do you define rural for tax purposes without creating endless arguments and loopholes? It sounds simple, but it's bureaucratically tricky.
Yeah, I can see that. What else helped build support?
Investing in the alternatives. A really big majority, 69%, said they'd be much more supportive if public transport was made significantly cheaper and better connected before this tax comes in.
Makes sense. If you want people to drive less, give them a viable
Right,
option.
and about half also backed the idea of targeted discounts or maybe higher allowances for specific groups, people like disabled drivers, key workers, those who absolutely need their car for their job. There's a public understanding, it seems, that a fair transition needs practical alternatives alongside the tax.
That seems logical. Okay, let's get into the really naughty stuff now. Implementation. This is where the policy ambition meets messy reality and technology. Deciding what to charge per mile is one thing. Figuring out how to actually monitor everyone's mileage without sparking mass panic about Big Brother surveillance.
Yeah.
That feels like the main event.
It's definitely the most complex hurdle, yeah. The idea of just asking people to self-report their mileage, the sources basically called that comically naive, impossible to enforce properly.
Right, you need something reliable.
You do. So if the tax is going to work, they need systems that are robust, but also crucially seen as non-invasive by the public.
So where did the public draw the line? What level of monitoring were they actually prepared to accept in return for this potentially fairer tax system?
Well, the simplest and by far the most popular method was just checking the car's odometer reading during its annual MOT test.
The yearly checkup.
Exactly. That avoids any kind of live tracking, which hits the main privacy worry head on. But it's basic. It wouldn't allow for any smart variable charging.
Okay, so for a smarter system, you need tech. What tech did people find maybe grudgingly acceptable, and what were the conditions?
They were kind of split, but very conditional, using the car's built-in telematics or GPS. That got 46% support. Using a separate plug-in device, like a little dongle, 44% support. And this is a huge, but that support was totally dependent on an absolute guarantee. The tech must only track mileage, nothing else.
No location, no speed, no destination data?
Absolutely not. That was a deal breaker. People explicitly rejected anything that tracked where they went or how fast, and things like roadside cameras constantly scanning number plates or using insurance-style black boxes. They were deeply unpopular, seen as far too invasive, creating a feeling of constant state monitoring.
So the technology choice really dictates the policy options available. And the sources laid out 3 potential ways this could roll out, sort of phases. We should probably give them clearer names for listeners.
Good idea. How about option 1, the simple EV tax, option 2, the flat rate for all, and option 3, the full smart system?
Okay, I like that. Option 1, simple EV tax. Option 2, flat rate for all. Option 3, full smart system. Let's start with the end goal. Option 3, what's the full smart system?
Right, option 3, the full smart system, is really seen as the long-term ideal because it has the potential to be the fairest and most efficient. It relies completely on that tracking technology we just discussed, but it uses it to vary the charge per mile, not just based on the vehicle's emissions, but crucially based on where you're driving and even when you're driving, time of day.
So dynamic pricing.
Exactly. This is how you best tackle that core fairness issue. A driver in a rural area with no train line nearby, they could pay less per mile. Someone driving right into central London during morning rush hour, adding to massive congestion, they'd pay more. It tackles revenue and congestion.
But it requires the tracking technology that makes people nervous. So what are the stepping stones? Option 1 and 2.
Right. Option 1, the simple EV tax, is just that basic 3p per mile charge only for EVs we talked about earlier. It's simple, it starts plugging the revenue gap quickly, but it's not very sophisticated or fair across all drivers.
Okay. And option 2, the flat rate for all.
Option 2 is maybe the crucial interim step, or even a long-term alternative for people who hate tracking. This would replace fuel duty and VED for everyone, petrol, diesel, electric. The charge would be based on your vehicle type, maybe its emissions band, but, and this is key, it would only require checking the odometer at the MOT.
Ah, so no live tracking needed for option 2.
Correct. It avoids the constant tracking issue while still moving everyone to a cleaner, simpler tax structure based on vehicle impact, not just fuel used.
Got it. And one last implementation piece.
Yeah?
Fitting this new national system together with all the existing local charges like London's congestion charge or clean air zones in other cities, that seems vital to avoid total confusion.
Oh, absolutely critical. The public were really clear on this. There was strong support, 42%, for rolling all those existing local schemes into the single national system, maybe allowing cities to add a specific local top-up if needed. But fundamentally, drivers want one account, one bill, one system that makes sense.
Yeah, not juggling 5 different apps and charges just to drive across the country.
Nobody wants that.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. The core tension seems crystal clear. This kind of tax reform is becoming fiscally unavoidable. And the basic idea paying for the roads you actually use seems to have decent underlying support conceptually as being fair. But the design absolutely has to shield those people who drive out of sheer necessity, not choice.
That's the tightrope they have to walk. Politically, that's everything. And what's fascinating from the sources is the debate really has moved on. It's less about if some form of road pricing is coming and much more about how it gets done. And the public, perhaps surprisingly to some politicians, seems more open to this huge change than often assumed, provided, these are big provisos, provided the system is genuinely revenue neutral overall, so it doesn't become a stealth tax rise, just replacing the $35 billion currently raised. And secondly, it has to be incredibly transparent. People need to understand clearly why they're being charged, what they're being charged.
But drilling down into those options, the real key to unlocking political acceptance might lie in giving people a genuine choice, right? That way to handle the privacy concern.
That feels like the crucial takeaway, yeah. The public showed they might accept the smart tracking needed for option 3, the fully flexible system, but only if they have a clear, guaranteed way to opt out.
So you could offer option 3, the full smart system, with its variable rates based on time and place.
But allow any driver who says, nope, I don't want tracking, period, to instead choose option 2. Pay a higher fixed annual charge based purely on their car type, verified only by the MOT odometer check.
So it boils down to this. Privacy comes at a fixed, potentially higher price. Flexibility and potentially lower costs require accepting some form of mileage tracking. Does offering that straightforward choice hold the key to making this massive, inevitable reform political possible? That's probably the question for you to chew on as we all start thinking about the future of how we pay for our roads.